Not a good teenager either. And Mom, I thought I was very smart, but I would slough school very regularly, like almost every day at the end. And I always knew that I could stop by the house and tell Mom I had a headache and came home to get ibuprofen, and she would write a note to get me excused from school. And she was so good about it.
My favorite memory back on Mihu. We went over when we were young. I think I was like 10 or 11 or a young teenager. But while we were there, I was up early and Grandma Mihu was making bread and poached eggs, and she took that time with me to teach me how to cook. And that week that we were there, she taught me how to make creamed eggs on toast and all kinds of food. And taught me how to grind wheat. And I miss her. I love her.
Okay, so this memory of Mom that I'm going to talk about is Mom wanted to go on vacations, and vacations were not important to Dad, but they were super important to Mom. So she thought of a way that she could do it, and it was by worming. And so gross, but we would get up super early in the morning, fill these huge garbage cans full of water and this solution that would make night crawlers crawl up from the ground, and we would go out there and just faithfully pick these worms, put them into buckets, and go sell them. And I remember how terrible that was, but the payoff was that we started to go on vacations with our family. And so that's all of this memory, but there are some fabulous things that followed from that. So that's my...
Okay, one of my main memories with Mom is when we lived in Idaho Falls still. I was hanging out pestering Jeremy and Robert, and at one point one of them told me that I wasn't their real brother. They just found me in a garbage can, and Mom decided to bring me home. I thought that was pretty funny. So about a day or two later, Kimberly and I are fighting, and I just tell her, well, you're not even my real sister. We just found you in a garbage can, and you're adopted. Kimberly ran off, and so I thought I won. I turned and I walked my happy little bum downstairs, feeling so proud, and then next thing I know, I hear Mom storming down the stairs. I'll show you who was found in a garbage can. She picks me up, takes me out to the garage, and puts me in one of the tin garbage cans that we had out there, puts the lid on, walks away.
And we knew we knew then that she was Superwoman, because look at you, how big you are and how little she was.
Dude, that was back when I was like 6 or 7. Like I was little back then. I was a skinny kid.
I remember when Grandma went bald because of the surgery, and we all shaved our heads for her. It was really hard, but I did it for Grandma, and it really hurts to lose her. There's so many things that I love doing with her, and it hurts to know that we can't do that anymore with her. I am happy that she's happy with God, but it hurts to lose her. It really hurts. I don't know if I can make it through it that easily. It hurts so much.
So there was the Christmas party where we were at the Clifton Community Center, and a few of us decided to start making a video, and not everybody got in on the message. So some of us were just having this kind of sub activity of making a video, and Mom was so excited to be in it. Her and Dad got to be the two walking to the door in the dark and hoping it's a great party, and I remember how excited Mom was to be in that. It was fun.
One thing I remember about Mom was how much she loved playing games. She was a hard worker, but she was a hard player when it was time to play. So at many family gatherings, we would just sit and play games around the table, and Mom did not want to go to bed, but she was so tired, and she would fall asleep at her chair playing the games because she just didn't want to miss out.
One of my favorite memories of Mom, we were in Oxford, and all of us kids had come in for a reunion and just to be with the family, etc. And we were having a water fight. This was kind of a tradition with the Bodley family, and we would have water fights, etc. At reunions. But anyway, we were having this water fight, and Mom, the rule was if you were outside, you were fair game, and Mom walked outside, never having participated in water fights before, and she was always this lady, and who was kind of immune to things of this nature. But I took the opportunity to encourage her to play with us. By dousing her with a bucket full of water. And you could hear the gasps from everyone about, you can do that with Mom? And it was great. It was fun. Mom played. She participated in the water fight with us. It was awesome. I love that.
So, when I was really little and we took that trip back east, one of the things I found to be amazing was Mom and Dad. There wasn't enough room in the Ford Aerostar for all of us to fit. So not only did we have kids piled on top of kids in the seats going cross country, but we had this little plastic chair that they put in the center between them, and that was my seat. That's where I got to hang out. And so I remember anytime Dad, who was always a wild driver, anytime he'd hit the brakes kind of fast, or anytime Mom would get a little alarmed, her seatbelt hand would just come over as if she was gonna keep me from going through the windshield. But she always had that quick reflex and that thought to make sure that I was taken care of, even though she was taken care of. She had a seatbelt and everything, but she would always make sure that her arm was over there to make sure I didn't go anywhere.
So after the big trip to the East Coast, there was the little trip to the East Coast, where those of us who were in homeschool, I think it was just me, Kimberly, and Nate, got to have the whole back of the van to ourselves with no seats. So we were just on blankets in the back, driving from Idaho to South Carolina to move Ron back to Idaho. And Mom used that as a teaching experience, had to stop for probably every type of tree in the country and collect a leaf, and then we took them back and put them in a wax and taped them into a book. So we each had a book with just all these different kinds of leaves from across the whole country. Okay. So when I was really young, David, Jeremy, and I shared a room and a love of board games. And David had the knowledge of how to get out of school so we could play more board games. And he taught us that we all just get sick at the same time. So one day we did that. We got sick at the same time and played board games all day. Played Axis and Allies and Fortress America. And Mom learned from that and came up with her own strategy. So the next time that we were all sick at the same time, she had the new rule that we would go to different rooms until school was over. And we couldn't be together until school was over. And that was the last time that we got sick at the same time.
This is a story about Mom and I as we were just young married. we moved into a brand new apartment complex on 24th Street there in Boise. And she fixed breakfast for us before church, and we sat down to eat, and I was feeling really good. And so I started humming. Don't believe I was singing. I think I was just humming, but anyway, she told me that we shouldn't do that at the table. And we had a brief discussion about that. Why? Because it's just not right, and we don't want to teach our children that they can sit at the table and have their meal and sing, and I wasn't very educated yet in being married, and I said, I made another comment anyway, and she got really quite angry, and she jumped up, and it was about time for her to get ready to go to church, so she went into the bathroom, and I had already taken my bath and prepared to go to priesthood meeting, which was just right away, and so I was sitting there eating my breakfast, and she went into the bathroom and closed the door really hard and turned on the water. Well, when you turned on the water from a guy that's already taken a shower, sometimes the plug doesn't drop in to change that shower to the faucet, and the shower was still plugged in. And I knew it was time for me then to go to priesthood meeting. So I immediately left. But she was all right when I got home to pick her up for sacrament meeting.
So Mom was really lucky to get to deal with those of us who had just barely gotten our licenses sometimes. And after I got my license, when I got my license, she drove me in Jeremy's Mustang to Preston, and we got my license, and she said she didn't want to drive it home. And so I drove it home, and I'd never driven a stick shift before. And his stick shift in that Mustang was really stiff. So, needless to say, we never got up over about 15 miles per hour, and we never went more than about 20 feet in a before coming to a complete stop. We were very good at complete stops until we'd made it all the way past Clifton, and one of Jeremy's friends comes out and yells, "Give it some gas, Bob!" And finally I realized I was never giving it enough gas, and was able to do it from then on. But Mom sat there getting bounced around for over 10 miles without complaining. And she never complained to me once for it.
I'm not.
It has to be on a dark circle.
One of the memories that I have thought about many times over the last 5 years was when Mom came to Idaho Falls, and her blood pressure was so high that she had to be taken to the emergency room. And I was there at the emergency room when they took her for an MRI, and they came back and said that she was full of cancer, that they thought she was near the end of her life. And so I called all my siblings. It was right before Christmas, and they all came, and they admitted Mom to the hospital, and everyone was there sitting in that room, and Mom wanted to hear "O Divine Redeemer." And we sat around her bed and listened to her favorite song and cried. And we sang other songs with her, and it was such a spiritual experience. I will never forget being able to do that with my mom, and wasn't able to do that with her when she did pass away. But I'm grateful that we had that experience to be there and comfort her and love her.
Mom was always a little self-conscious that her hair was thin and she didn't feel beautiful about it. So a couple of years ago we were doing Family Search, and it's got this feature where you can go through and put your picture in and then compare it to see what ancestors do you look the most like. And so we had put in a picture of Eden, and then when we were comparing, it pulled up Mom, that she looked like in the 70% like Mom. So it was one of the ones that she looked the most strongly like. And so we took those pictures over and showed them to Mom, so that she would see that, because we just thought that was super special. And Mom was so flattered. She just thought that was really neat because she thinks that Eden is so beautiful and she loves her hair, and she just saw herself in a very different light because it helped her see the beauty in herself by seeing it in her grandchild that she admires and loves.
Okay. So 5 or 6 years ago, I took Mom for her first pedicure, and she had never done anything like that for herself. And she loved it. And she would call me when she'd go get a pedicure and just let me know, I got my toenails done and they're so pretty. And she wanted to make sure before she had any procedures or whatever that her toenails looked good. And if you notice, her fingernails have been done recently, and I'm just really happy that she got to go with her fingernails and toenails looking really good.
So I got two, so hopefully I get a twofer. But the first one is, I loved Mom's tapioca pudding. She would make me tapioca pudding because she knew that I loved it so much. And one of the last times that I came down here to Arizona, Mom was going to make me some tapioca pudding, and she made me like 5 gallons of tapioca pudding. I'm like, I cannot eat that. You know, I mean, it was crazy, but I mean, it was awesome. And so loved that. She would do that and go out of her way to make sure that I got the type of dessert that I loved. My other memory, that we were building the house in Clifton, and Dad was always out in the garage with the saws going and cutting up lumber and all that sort of stuff. And one time he was cutting some lumber on the table saw and had a slight little accident. Might have caught his thumb in the saw, and really just took a slice out of his thumb, maybe 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep, across his thumb. Well, he grabs it and he goes inside, and this is the only time I can remember Mom ever being overcome with something. But she was overcome and fainted. And so I remember people putting her in a chair, and you know, Dad's over at the sink with blood everywhere, and I mean, it was a chaotic time. But that's the only time I ever remember Mom being really affected by that. But come to think of it, now when I cut my arm, she also was affected by that. But she was going to take me to the hospital, and she was shaking so bad that I was concerned that we weren't going to make it to the hospital, and so I made her stay and had Dad take me instead. But yeah, Mom really she got emotional when her family got hurt.
Okay, when we lived in Clifton, I remember that we lived on 10 acres, and I think about an acre of it was garden, and about an acre of it was orchard, and Mom would have us make our own food, so much of it. So I remember doing so much work, but we would go out and pick beans, and she would come out and pick buckets and buckets of beans, and then we'd go in and the table would be just piled with beans, and then it would be time for the corn, and we'd pull corn and just do all the corn, and we'd do apples, and she would spend her whole day doing applesauce or making apple cider or whatever it was that she was doing as it was in season. So we would can, or she went through periods where we'd make butter or we'd make cheese, and we just had all these experiences of making our own food, and we had jars and jars in our food storage. So you could go down and grab a can of peaches or a can of pears or a can of green beans, and we just grew up on those foods that were so healthy and wholesome and good. And I just have my memories of the food that Mom would make. We had fresh baked bread, and I think we all have memories of the smell of Mom's fresh baked bread coming out of the oven and being able to tear it apart and melt butter and honey, and her granola that she would make, big buckets of granola, and it was just chewy and delicious, and those are some of my great memories of Mom.
My turn.
Yeah.
Mom had some serious experiences while we were in Clifton. We were raising sheep at one time, and we had to have a ram for them, and so we did have a ram, and in the spring they started lambing, and Mom would go out and take the lambs and their mothers and put them in a shed we had so that they'd be warmer. And so she got fairly comfortable around the sheep, and later on that summer, corn came on, and so she was going to husk a bunch of it, and she had a pile of it in front of the front door, and went out to what do you take that stuff off of it? Husk it.
Just shuck it.
And as she was starting to husk it, this ram was loose, just running on her place apparently, and it came over and butted her and knocked her down. She was pregnant, and then he wouldn't let her up. Every time she tried to stand up and get away, he'd knock her down again, till finally our neighbor came over and took the ram and tied him up. And that was close to the end of the ram, but yes, just another experience that Laurene had, and never complained.
Here we go.
So the last 6 years we've been blessed by having Mom and Dad live down by us, and one of our favorite things is we have Friday night game night. So we get to play hand and foot with Mom and Dad every Friday night. And Mom is so good at cards that she will get her hand of cards and she will count. And even as she got towards the end, more confused, she would sit there and she would count, and she would forget when it came around to her turn, like,
No.
how many do we need to lay
No.
down? And we'd remind
I
her,
do love
like,
you,
oh, Mom, you
but
need
not that way.
120 this time. And so she would sit there and be like counting and counting, and then we'd come around to her turn and we'd remind her again, how many do you need? But even when she couldn't keep track of the game, it would come time and she has these little tells of, oh man, she's got it. And she would start going and she would grab every card in her hand and hand it over to Dad and lay it all down and go right into her foot, and she would just cream you. There was no beating Mom. So that's just one of my favorite things about her.
So, Mom, back when we were way young again, thought that it was incumbent upon all young children to have a steady diet of liver. And so she would cook it for us quite often. And I did not like liver. And so I was very creative in finding places, siblings' plates, in the bookshelf, where little slivers of liver could go and live out the rest of their lives. And it was great. Everybody was happy. I was happy because the liver was not being consumed. Mom was happy because she thought the liver was being consumed. I don't know how she wasn't finding it all over the house. But we were all pretty happy in how this all was going. Until the final time that Mom ever made me liver. She was making liver. It has a aroma that just fills the home. So delicate and delicious and nauseating all at the same time. So she was making liver, and I told her, if you put that liver on my plate, I am going to throw up. And she put the liver on my plate, and I threw up because I am a man of my word. I immediately got sent to bed. And so I went to bed and I fell asleep, and I woke up a couple hours later thinking that it was the next morning, and I got up and I went out, and there on the table is Dave's plate, and sitting on this plate was potatoes, and on top of the potatoes was what I thought was the liver. It was actually congealed gravy at that point. But I saw that, thought it was liver, and I threw up again. And Mom never cooked liver for me again. One of my favorite memories is when we were little kids. Mom was so engaged in our lives and just loved to spend time with us, and wanted to make sure that her children were cultured as well, right? And so she would read to us, and so I was brought up on wonderful books like Little Women, and what else did she read to us? She probably read to us Pride and Prejudice, but Little Women is the one that I remember the most, and I really liked Jo. I don't remember why, but I did.
She was a tomboy.
Yeah, that's probably why.
All right, so I was going to tell about our trip back east. We piled into this van, our whole family, to go back east for a month. And we couldn't take suitcases because we didn't have room, so Mom bought us these little plastic baskets to put all of our stuff in. And then we would fight too much over whose spot was what in the van. So Mom was so sweet that she would rotate with us every hour or so in the van, and we would switch seats. And she had all these little things for us to do, so she planned all these activities so that we were engaged and had a good time in the van. on this long road trip where we went back east. And I just remember being so grateful that she would be thoughtful instead of selfish. And that was pretty consistent throughout her life.
I was a bratty teenager and so embarrassed to go out and pick worms because my friends might see me. So I told Mom one day how embarrassed I was, and she told me I didn't have to go anymore. I could stay home and do the housework, and everyone else would go pick worms. So that's how it went for me.
We're good?
Yeah, we're recording.
Oh, okay. So one of the big things that I remember with Mom that was crazy special, and I wish I could have back, is Christmas and Thanksgiving. This one would make homemade stuffing, and we'd have the toaster running, and you just get these big piles of bread, and I'd love to just sit there at the mixing bowl and just break apart her bread and like just sit there and make this stuffing with Mom. It was the best stuffing I've ever had, and probably ever will again. And it was an experience that, oh man, you just felt like $1 million sitting there with Mom making this special treat for the next day, and it was amazing.
The ram did not survive the night. When Dad got home, he heard about what happened, and he went and got his .32 and shot the ram in the forehead, and the .32 would not penetrate the ram's skull. So it was difficult. I can't remember how we ended up, how you ended up finishing off the ram.
The neighbor came that was renting from us in the house. The neighbor came with his gun. He had I don't think we were using 9mm in those days. But,
45?
Yeah, it was a handgun, and he shot him, and that ram went down.
But Dad's little .32 was like bouncing off.
Yeah,
You don't cross Mom.
It was.
That was the moral of the story. Okay, I'm recording this for Jennifer just in case she doesn't record it because it has got to go in there. But my mom was not a doctor and she didn't play one on TV. But she went through this phase where she would give enemas for what ails you. And we had some aspargum too at the same time. And Ron had a headache, and so he got some aspargum. And Jennifer wanted some aspargum, and she did not know what Ron had. And so she told Mom that she had a stomach ache. So Mom asked her if she wanted an enema, and Jennifer said yes, thinking that it was the aspargum. And Jennifer knew from that point forward never to place it.
So I have a memory about Grandma when I was a really young youngster. We were when they lived in Oxford, they had a little park across the street, and for some reason we were having a big family meal at that park and potluck picnic or something. And I was under the age of 12 because it was still in the in my household with my mom and family. I still had the rule where I couldn't drink any caffeinated drinks. And Grandma had a little cooler there. I opened it up, and I saw a Pepsi that I wanted, and I was like, "Grandma, can I have the Pepsi?" And she's like, "Yeah, go ahead." And she didn't know that was my rule, but I knew. But she just let me have the Pepsi, and I was the happiest little kid in the world.